The most shocking aspect of this case isn't that one of the world's richest men was brutally murdered in his own bedroom. It's that the former King of England personally took control of the investigation, bypassed local authorities, and brought in detectives who had no jurisdiction, leading to evidence tampering so blatant that it included a fingerprint literally lifted from the suspect and planted at the crime scene. Viewer discretion is advised. If you're fascinated by true crime mysteries involving royalty and high society scandals, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel with notifications turned on for more incredible stories like this one. July 8, 1943, dawned hot and humid in Nassau, the capital of the Bahamas, where the wealthy elite had gathered to escape both taxes and the ravages of World War II. Among them was Sir Harry Oakes, a 68-year-old gold mining magnate who had become the richest man in the British Empire outside of the royal family itself. His sprawling estate, Westbourne, sat majestically overlooking the turquoise waters of Nassau Harbor, a testament to the incredible fortune he had built from nothing through sheer determination and an obsessive quest for gold. But on this particular morning, the tranquil paradise would be shattered by a discovery so brutal and bizarre that it would become known as the crime of the century. At approximately 7 a.m., Harold Christie, Oakes's business partner and close friend, made a horrifying discovery when he went to check on his host. In the master bedroom of Westbourne, he found Sir Harry Oakes lying in his bed, but the scene was unlike anything the police had ever encountered. The crime scene was a nightmare of violence and strange ritualistic elements that defied explanation. Oakes had been bludgeoned to death with such savage force that his skull was completely crushed, blood spattering the walls and ceiling of the elegant bedroom. But the killer hadn't stopped there. In a bizarre twist that would fuel conspiracy theories for decades, someone had attempted to burn the body, though the fire had gone out before consuming the corpse entirely. Most disturbing of all, feathers from torn pillows had been scattered over Oakes' burned and battered body, creating a macabre scene that looked more like the result of some occult ritual than a conventional murder. The positioning of the body and the strange elements at the crime scene immediately suggested this was no ordinary killing. This was either the work of someone with a deep personal hatred for Harry Oakes, or it was meant to send a message. The question that would haunt investigators for decades was simple. Who would want to kill the richest man in the Bahamas, and why would they do it in such a grotesque and theatrical manner? To understand the magnitude of this crime, one must first understand the extraordinary life of Harry Oakes himself. Born in 1874 to a middle-class family in Sangerville, Maine, Oakes had started with nothing but an unshakable belief that he would find gold. After 2 years of medical school, he abandoned his studies in 1898 to pursue his obsession, spending the next 15 years working grueling hours in gold fields across the globe, from the Klondike to Australia, from the Philippines to Africa. For nearly 2 decades, Oakes lived like a monk, abstaining from alcohol, avoiding social relationships, and pouring every ounce of his energy into his quest for the mother lode. His breakthrough finally came at Kirkland Lake in northern Ontario, where he discovered what would become the second richest gold mine in Canadian history. The Lakeshore mine would eventually produce over $200 million worth of gold, making Oakes one of the wealthiest men in the world, with a fortune equivalent to over $3 billion in today's money. But wealth brought its own problems, particularly the burden of taxation. Oakes became obsessed with protecting his fortune from government taxes, making him one of the world's first major tax exiles. In 1935, he moved his family to the Bahamas, a British crown colony with no income tax, where he could live in luxury while keeping his vast fortune intact. He purchased enormous tracts of land, built a golf course and an airport, and became the largest private landowner in the islands. However, Oakes' move to the Bahamas placed him in a dangerous world of international intrigue. The islands had become a haven not just for wealthy tax exiles, but for Nazi sympathizers, British spies, money launderers, drug traffickers, and organized crime figures. The small white elite known as the Bay Street Boys controlled everything, while the majority of the population lived in poverty. Into this volatile mix came some of the most notorious figures of the era, including Swedish industrialist Axel Wenner-Gren, a known Nazi sympathizer who counted Hermann Göring among his close friends. The situation became even more complex in 1940, when the Duke and Duchess of Windsor arrived in Nassau. The Duke, formerly King Edward VIII, who had abdicated the British throne in 1936 to marry American divorcee Wallis Simpson, had been appointed governor of the Bahamas, essentially an exile disguised as a prestigious posting. Both the Duke and Duchess were suspected of Nazi sympathies, and their presence in the Bahamas during wartime created a powder keg of political tensions and conflicting loyalties. Oakes's personal life was equally complicated. His favorite daughter, Nancy, had married Alfred de Marigny, a twice-divorced French count with a reputation as a playboy and possible predator. The marriage infuriated Oakes, who saw de Marigny as a fortune hunter seeking to exploit his daughter and gain access to the family wealth. The relationship between Oakes and his son-in-law was openly hostile, with frequent arguments and threats that were witnessed by numerous people in Nassau's small social circle. When Harold Christie discovered Oakes' body that morning, he immediately called the police, but the investigation that followed would become almost as shocking as the murder itself. Rather than allowing local Bahamian authorities to handle the case, the Duke of Windsor took personal control of the investigation, a decision that would raise suspicions about his motives for decades to come. In an unprecedented move, the Duke bypassed all local law enforcement and brought in two detectives from Miami, Captain Edward Melchin and Captain James Barker. These men had no jurisdiction in the Bahamas, no knowledge of local conditions, and no legal authority to conduct a murder investigation on British soil. Their appointment was so irregular that it immediately raised questions about whether the Duke was trying to solve the case or cover it up. The Miami detectives wasted no time in focusing their investigation on Alfred de Marigny, despite the fact that he had a solid alibi for the night of the murder. De Marigny had been at a dinner party with multiple witnesses until late in the evening, and there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime scene. However, the detectives seemed determined to build a case against him regardless of the facts. What happened next would become one of the most notorious examples of evidence tampering in criminal history. Captain Barker claimed to have found de Marigny's fingerprint on a Chinese screen near Oakes' bed, the only fingerprint evidence in the entire case. However, the defense would later prove that this fingerprint had been lifted from a glass that de Marigny had handled during his interrogation and then transferred to the screen. The evidence tampering was so blatant that it shocked even seasoned legal observers. The trial of Alfred de Marigny became an international sensation, with reporters from around the world descending on Nassau to cover the proceedings. The prosecution's case fell apart under scrutiny, with expert witnesses demonstrating that the fingerprint evidence had been fabricated and that the investigation had been conducted with shocking incompetence. After a dramatic trial that exposed the corruption and cover-up surrounding the case, de Marigny was acquitted of all charges. However, his acquittal did nothing to solve the mystery of who had actually killed Harry Oakes. The investigation effectively ended with de Marigny's trial, and no other suspects were ever seriously pursued. The Duke of Windsor's handling of the case had been so questionable that many suspected he was protecting the real killer, but his motives remained unclear. In the decades since the murder, numerous theories have emerged about who killed Harry Oakes and why. Some investigators have pointed to organized crime figures connected to Meyer Lansky, who was seeking to establish casino operations in the Bahamas and may have seen Oakes as an obstacle. Others have suggested that Oakes's business dealings or his connections to Nazi sympathizers may have made him a target for assassination. Perhaps the most disturbing theory is that the Duke of Windsor himself was involved in a cover-up to protect powerful friends or political allies. The Duke's irregular handling of the investigation, his appointment of unqualified detectives, and his apparent lack of interest in finding the real killer have never been satisfactorily explained. Today, nearly 80 years after the brutal murder of Sir Harry Oakes, the case remains officially unsolved. The crime scene has long since been cleaned up, the witnesses have died, and the evidence has been lost or destroyed. What remains is one of the most fascinating and disturbing murder mysteries of the 20th century. A case that involves royalty, organized crime, international intrigue, and a level of corruption that shocked the world. The murder of Harry Oakes serves as a reminder that wealth and power cannot always protect us from violence, and that sometimes the most dangerous enemies are those closest to us. It also demonstrates how easily justice can be perverted when those in authority have their own agendas to protect. If you found this royal murder mystery as compelling as we did, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel with notifications turned on. We explore the most intriguing true crime cases and historical mysteries from around the world, bringing you stories of power, corruption, and unsolved crimes that continue to fascinate us decades later. Your support helps us continue investigating these incredible cases. Until next time, remember that some secrets are buried so deep that they may never see the light of day, but the search for truth never ends.